Hi.
Hello again.
We're going to promote a new book for the Basic Christian Library. This is the book. Here, I'm going to try. That's The Cost of Discipleship, Dietrich Bonhoeffer. So the way we were introduced to this book was early in our church days, when we'd left the Witnesses a few years, and then we settled into a church. And a lot of the people in the church were familiar with Bonhoeffer, and the minister spoke about him quite frequently and encouraged us to learn more about his life and his thinking.
We knew he was controversial, I think, already because we were in the book business for 4 or 5 years before we even got to that church and started regularly attending there.
Yeah.
It was what our friends would have considered a liberal church, United Church of Canada, although Victor, our pastor, was conservative. But our conservative friends had serious reservations about Dietrich Bonhoeffer because they had heard he was a liberal. Very few of them have read anything of him. He's written several books, and this is the most famous of them.
So they didn't think he was conservative enough.
Yeah, he wasn't conservative enough for them. Whereas in the liberal circles, he was considered to be conservative. There's church politics for you.
Yeah. But in reading the book then, and I discovered I actually did read the whole book because I've got notes at the back of the book. So that's my proof.
But that's pretty close to 30 years ago.
Yeah, so I'm going to have to reread it. I was looking over some of the notes this morning, so I could see why I liked the book, because of his emphasis on discipleship.
He was, of course, a crossover figure because his influence extended beyond the Christian world. So just as conservatives knew who he was, and liberals certainly knew who he was, so the non-Christian world knew who he was because of the task he had faced in opposing Nazism in Germany in the 1930s. He'd also traveled to North America in part of his education, so he had lots of contacts in the Western world as well as in Germany.
Yeah.
And the controversy, though, is kind of summed up on the back. Why was he controversial and significant to the world beyond Christianity? Well, there's a little bit of the bio on the back of the book. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was born in Breslau in 1906, the son of a famous German psychiatrist, so his family was famous. He studied in Berlin and New York City. He left the safety of America to return to Germany and continue his public repudiation of the Nazis, which led to his arrest in 1943. Linked to the group of conspirators whose attempted assassination of Hitler failed, he was hanged in April 1945. Some of you may have seen a film about the one of the assassination attempts. I think it was a Tom Cruise film called Valkyrie. There's been a movie since we read the book. There's been a movie or two made about him, and therefore his moral influence is remarkable and crosses over all boundaries.
I think that's another reason why he can be a controversial figure among Christians, because they might not feel their conscience would allow them to make the ethical choices that Bonhoeffer made.
Yeah. The blurb on the back of the book says, "What can the call to discipleship, the adherence to the word of Jesus, mean today to the businessman, the soldier, the laborer, or the aristocrat? What did Jesus mean to say to us? What is his will for us today?" Drawing on the Sermon on the Mount, Dietrich Bonhoeffer answers these timeless questions by providing a seminal reading of the dichotomy between cheap grace and costly grace. Cheap grace, Bonhoeffer wrote, is the grace we bestow on ourselves, grace without discipleship. Costly grace is the gospel which must be sought again and again, the gift which must be asked for, the door at which a man must know. It is costly because it costs a man his life, and it is grace because it gives a man the only true life. The cost of discipleship is a compelling statement of the demands of sacrifice and ethical consistency from a man whose life and thought were exemplary articulations of a new type of leadership inspired by the gospel and imbued with the spirit of Christian humanism and a creative sense of civic duty. Now, he'd written this book before World War II, so he was already thinking about this issue of why it was that German Christians, whether they be Lutherans or Reformed or Catholic, were all rolling over before the onslaught and before the steamroller of Nazism.
Yeah.
And he realized it had to do with the shallowness of discipleship across the board in German churches.
Yeah, yeah. There's two blurbs. One is from Life. It says, among the Flossenburg martyrs was a remarkable young Lutheran pastor named Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who had joined the underground convinced that it was his duty as a Christian to work for Hitler's defeat. Bonhoeffer was only 39 when he died, but he had already made a monumental contribution to Christian thought, which today has profound and growing significance for both theologian and layman. Bonhoeffer's books are gaining an astonishing popularity in the secular world. He is admired by people who have read his best-known books, The Cost of Discipleship, this one, and Letters and Papers from Prison, as the example of what a modern Christian must be. And then Times Literary Supplement of London said, a very moving book, lived as well as written.
So we're going to do a riff on this book. It's not exactly based on the book, but it's based on the idea that Bonhoeffer exemplified, namely that if we're not ready, if our level of discipleship doesn't make us ready for the crises that come in society, Christians will fail. Christians will not be a witness to the world of the glory of Christ. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to do a series after this called The Cost of Discipling, because after all, if you don't think of yourself as having to disciple others, you likely will not become a discerning Christian yourself, and won't take discipleship on the local church level seriously. Mm-hmm. And that's still the case in the churches we've been in. Most Christians just don't see the necessity of them getting any deeper into into what it means to be a Christian disciple.
Mm-hmm. Your life too, it has to have that power of being discipled, so that you can be an example for others and strengthen the church.
Now, I know you've done a video on this based on Victor Shepard's own meditations.
Yeah, so we'll link that.
Bonhoeffer, right?
Yes, he Victor Shepard, I read through 25 little mini bios of different people, and Bonhoeffer is one of them. So we will link that to the end of this video. Thanks.
See you for that new series, The Cost of Discipling.
Mm-hmm.